You can listen to The Professional Left on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for July 6th, 2018. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where we spent the 4th of July picking up middle child from the airport and not dancing the night away with a Russian dictator. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Hey there, Driftglass.
Yeah, we saw fireworks, too, on our way back to Springfield, but... yeah, we didn't make that junket to Russia, A, because we were busy, and B, because no Democrats were allowed.
No Democrats went to Russia. No Democrats,
they were disinvited.
No Democrats have Nazis on the ballot this time around or ever. No. Mm-hmm. But the Republicans have like 4 or 5. So,
yeah, well, that balances out the molester enablers. But, you got to have...
in the White House.
Well, no, in Congress.
In the Congress. Well, we're going to get to Jim Jordan in a minute, but we have to talk about our new sponsor first.
Our new sponsor. We're very proud of our new sponsor. It didn't knock anyone out of place, but we really feel this one catches the spirit of our times. Our new sponsor is called Hello Fascist. It's the at-home meal kit for Republicans. Hello Fascist is on a mission to provide every Trump administration stooge and enabler in America with fresh home-cooked meals, with no planning, no shopping, and no one calling you out for your moral depravity in public.
Sarah H. of Washington, D.C. says, previously dinner meant sneaking into a restaurant in disguise and hoping that no one would recognize me before my food arrived. With Hello Fascist, now I can try to fill the hole in my soul with deep-fried Twinkies and sour mash in peace.
Stephen M., also of Washington, D.C., says... he was sick and tired of MS-13 gangs peeing in my Cobb salad. I know that's not vinaigrette, Pedro. So thank God for Hello Fascist. It's like a big, beautiful wall around my tiramisu. Hello Fascist, because those people are definitely peeing in your food.
We are not accepting them as a sponsor.
And of course, we also welcome back. We have a panoply of fake sponsors, but we do want to focus this week on Hello Fascist and, of course, RubeTube. RubeTube is your deplorable past coming back to haunt your depraved present. If the phrase Merrick Garland being used in your vicinity makes your skin crawl, well, the customer fulfillment vertical synergy integrators at RubeTube have a special SCOTUS 4th of July Democracy Going Out of Business sale offered just for you. Just type in the offer code Federalist Society and begin enjoying the soothing 100% fact-filtered news today. RubeTube, it's Fox News without Shep Smith.
And Driftglass, we have to point out that Fox News once again became the story this week.
They did in so many different ways.
They did. It was even covered on CNN, and you might have missed it with your holiday festivities. But CNN actually had to have a panel discuss Fox News and the fact that they lie all the time, and you can't trust them. Mm-hmm. Apparently, there was a political campaign in Iran, and a crazy person was running for office.
Yeah, that happens. It happens in the best
that's what I said. It happens. And some political candidates will say anything like Mexico will pay for a border wall. So, there's all kinds of things that go on in political campaigns. But this particular crazy person in Iran apparently said something to the effect of, look, the deal we made with the United States made my opponent's political party rich and got them U.S. citizenship. 2,500 people got U.S. citizenship from Barack Obama. This isn't true, folks.
This is a complete lie, complete fabrication by one person halfway around the world.
Running for office and trying to say stuff that will gin up his base. We never heard that before. Mm-hmm. And but of course, because it's about the Iran deal and Barack Obama, it's the perfect thing to distract everybody from 700 marches and hundreds of thousands of people protesting this administration and their treatment of children. So Fox News and Fox and Friends picked it up.
And hocus pocus, dominocus, it becomes it becomes credible reporting.
Yeah, and the Democratic plants on that network, and there are some, we're all like saying, no, look, this isn't true, guys. You really, you're going to get caught on this one. And it didn't matter because it's anti-Barack Obama. We're going to say it, and we're just asking the question, did 2,500 Iranians get citizenship because of this? We got to ask the question, right?
Palling around with terrorists, he does that all the time.
So there's a person who actually has an office in the Oval Office of the White House, and he also has access to probably, we hope, the best intelligence information in the world.
We pay for it. It better be good.
We pay a lot for it, and but he likes watching Fox and Friends.
Yes. Instead of actual information, he likes sitting his fat ass down, spending half his morning watching Steve Doocy telling him what to think.
Right, and then tweeting about it. And so the so-called president of the United States tweeted that 2,500 Iranians are now running around the United States with American citizenship. Mm-hmm. Which is not true.
Yeah.
And this is manufactured out of Republican media, and fake news. Hate to use that word because I know where that comes from.
Thin air.
But thin air out of, the propaganda network for the White House.
Well, and there's a way to fix that. In my humble opinion, the best possible course of action is to take a disgraced, unemployed Fox News sexual predator enabler and blackmailer and make him the White House Deputy Chief of Staff of Communications.
Yeah, Deputy Chief of Staff and Communications Director. He's going to hold two jobs now. So,
Bill Shine.
Because you know what? Pissing off women voters is working out so well for them.
Yeah. Well, in case you don't know who this is Bill Shine, who was Roger Ailes' co-enabler at Fox News. He helped set up the shit show that is Fox News. He's a scumbag going back many, many years. He absolutely covered up and enabled the entire Fox, sexual predator petting zoo,
sexual harassment. Yeah.
And it was so bad that they had to let him go. When you get let go from Fox News for having no values at all, for being a degenerate, it's pretty bad. So he's been unemployed for about a year, kicking around, on the beach, wondering what to do with his life, as we all do when we get laid off. And suddenly we got a call from the White House saying, hey, why don't you come over here and front for me and be in charge of all the communications coming out of the White House. So that should fix that whole Fox News problem immediately. And
we have another enabler in the news, and we hinted at this, Jim Jordan. Yeah. Jim Jordan's quote about all this is, just leave me out of it. Apparently, this team physician actually showered with athletes.
Yes.
And touched them and did lots of other bad things. And he's it's bad. And apparently it's like 2,000 athletes over 15 universities and colleges.
Some colossal number.
20 years. And when you know that there's 2,000 victims out there, saying, leave me out of it when you were one of the coaches.
Yeah.
And people that are calling you their friend and saying, he is a friend of mine. I care about him. He's a friend of mine, but he's lying. Right. If he said he didn't know anything about it, it's time to own up.
Right.
And Jim Jordan is already a very bad person because he's a propaganda minister in the Politburo that is the Republican House.
He is a leading scumbag in the Freedom Caucus. He likes waving around fake news reports like Joe McCarthy and screaming that this news report says things
plural, and it's always a Fox News hit piece. We talk about that last week.
It's a Fox News blogger who got picked up by Fox News that he's waving around. His job is to go on television and smirk and lie and smirk and lie and just project, you can't fucking touch me. You can't touch me. We run everything now. We're degenerate Nazis. We enable child molesters, and there's that fuck all you can do about it. So fuck you. You know what we're going to do? We're going to start having even more witch hunts, because that's what my base loves. My base are basically livestock. Fox News watching livestock. And they love this shit. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn the House of Representatives into a witch hunt factory. And I'm going to be in charge of it. And that's the asshole who ignored the pleas of thousands of students who were being allegedly molested by their coach over 20 years. So I would dearly like to see him get what's coming to him with interest. But then again, with the resignation of Scott Pruitt today, because apparently he ran out of things to steal. Scott Pruitt, this is
so bad.
This is breaking news. Scott Pruitt announced that he's resigning to spend more time with Donald Trump's mattresses. So he's going to be a very busy man, avoiding prosecution. Apparently, there's 13 or 14 investigations that are focused on him. But it doesn't matter how deep into the Republican Party you dig, you never find anyone who's not shit. Yep. That's the problem. The whole party is Jim Jordan. The whole party is Scott Pruitt. The whole party is Donald Trump. And that's why they put Bill Shine on top, which I think is uniquely appropriate because, as some of you know, the phrase to shine someone on means you lie to them. You purposely lie to them. And the guy who used to run Fox News, whose name is slang for lying to people, is now being put in charge of communication for the most degenerate administration in American history.
The NBC manimal of presidential administration is how I put it.
It's so bad. It's so very bad.
Driftglass, you said something last week on last week's podcast about never turn your back on a never Trumper.
Never turn your back on a never Trumper. I wanted
to read a tweet to you from yesterday from a person named Max Boot.
You know what? That's great because I wrote a whole post about Max Boot today.
You did?
I did.
Did you write about his tweet from yesterday?
I wrote about the Washington Post editorial that he wrote yesterday.
This is his tweet. This is his tweet promoting the Washington Post editorial that I replied to. I need to keep up with your blog. I know I do.
I just crank them out so fast, honey.
Bad wife. I just am.
In case you people out there don't know this, my wife spends her day keeping Crooks and Liars running, along with many other noble souls who keep the movement alive. They keep the gears running at one of the best liberal websites in the world.
Well, thank you. And sometimes I read your blog, and some days I don't.
I know.
So, I'm sorry I didn't read that. But Max Boot promoted his Washington Post editorial and I want you to see, because like David Brooks, sometimes Max Boot puts a razor blade in the apple.
Oh, he does.
Yeah. So here's his tweet. I join other principled conservatives. Now, there's a mini razor blade right there. Okay, right. You caught that one. Mini razor. Principled conservatives. I join other principled conservatives in rooting for a Democratic takeover of both houses in November.
Sure.
Like post-war Germany and Japan.
Okay.
Okay.
That's great.
Post-war Germany and Japan, the Republican Party... I'm going to read that again. Mm-hmm. Like post-war Germany and Japan, the Republican Party...
I'm not aware that they lost.
Yeah. The Republican Party must first be destroyed before it can be rebuilt.
Yes. And that's my job, to clean up your fucking mess, Max Boot.
Well, I said, oh, no, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
That's how I put it.
Nope.
Yeah. I said, look, Democrats can split and then both sides will agree that science is the thing.
Yeah.
And neither side, quote unquote, will try to take away health insurance from 20 million people and have a beer party to celebrate. Burn the lifeboats.
Yeah, I congratulated Max Boot on single-handedly figuring out all by himself that the Republican Party was full of Republicans.
Yes.
Way to go, Max Boot! And he said, after a lifetime as a Republican, I re-registered as an independent the day after Donald Trump's election.
And everybody gets to say it together. I'm an independent.
I mean, so brave. So brave. And if you don't know who Max Boot is, you probably weren't around during the Iraq War, because Max Boot was a prominent Iraq war porn purveyor and what we call a Bush regime dead ender.
Yep.
And now that he has somehow transformed his absolutely shitty record as a human being into a permanent fixture in the media and a guy who gets a Washington Post column, he would like a little goddamn credit, please. Because he, all by himself, I refer to him as the Archimedes of mediocrity, because all by himself, he discovered that the Republican Party is full of shitty people. And I don't know what new and exciting things he will discover all by himself tomorrow. But I do know this. The Washington Post will definitely pay him to tell us all about it.
Yep.
Isn't
that's
that exciting?
Right.
Isn't that exciting?
He gets the check cleared from the Washington Post. Congratulations.
I would like to, because we do have a new feature here in the Professional Left universe magazine that we're promoting called...
you are having a lot of fun with that. I have noticed your blog on this one. Go ahead.
I'm having fun because the idea that there is some massive, unforgivable betrayal of true conservatism by all these pretenders and monsters who snuck in the middle of the night and stole the conservative movement and stole republicanism away from good, honorable men like Michael Gerson and David Brooks is hilarious. And it's such a clear plank in the let's save our own asses media lifeboat.
Right.
That there's this other conservatism that was somehow betrayed either a minute ago or 5 minutes ago or an hour ago or 30 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever. And that's the real conservatism. And we're all real conservatives. And those people over there are bad. So I started my own magazine called True Conservative. It's a monthly journal of self-regard. And it has household tips, who wore it best, Conway or Pinochet. True or not, Oxford comma shouted down by Antifa goons. Just stories like that.
And I did appreciate that David Brooks was your first cover boy.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And he will be. And I started off as a monthly journal of self-regard, but really it's going to have to be a daily or weekly because this is so fucking frequent. And so David Brooks was unable to make it to the party today. So the New York Times gave their column to another guy to write David Brooks's column for him on the 4th of July. And there was one sentence I wrote that I was particularly pleased with. And that is this. Donald Trump is what American conservatism has always looked like when it thought no one was watching.
Exactly.
And that's what is unforgivable about Steve Schmidt and unforgivable about Max Boot. If you had an ounce of fucking sense, you would have seen this 30, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. You saw it yesterday. So I appreciate the fact that we now have your vote. Good for you. We could use all the votes we get. But what you need to do now is go away. You need to go off to the woods and repent and figure out how you fucked up so badly over so many years and piled up such a lovely personal fortune doing it. And why the fuck are you still on television? If you're this bad at knowing anything about politics and you were in the middle of it, then maybe your opinion isn't really that important. Maybe you're the one who should go away and learn from people who weren't wrong all the time for the last, 30 years. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Driftglass, do you think that there is anyone out there that a Steve Schmidt or Max Boot is convincing to change?
No, I don't think so at all. Because who's listening to them?
Yeah, right.
Who the fuck is listening to these people? Steve Schmidt is on MSNBC. Great, yeah, that's fantastic. Right. And so he's convincing a bunch of liberals that they were right. I don't need Steve Schmidt to tell me, hold my hand and give me a cookie, tell me I was right. Yep. I know I was right. I need Steve Schmidt to apologize for making the monster that we now have to join hands to defeat.
Yep.
And he made it while people like us were screaming at him, you are building a machine that will kill us all. Why don't you stop? And Steve Schmidt picked his ass, looked at us and said, because I want to win elections, and went right on about his merry business. And now the machine's running out of control. He would very much like to keep his seat on MSNBC and remind everyone that 2 minutes ago he figured all this shit out by himself. Well, good for him. Bravo, man. That's great. You sobered up. You had a moment of clarity. That's great. But you know what? These people backslide every fucking time. And the reason I know this is we've been through this before.
Well, we saw it last week, too, and we talked about it. I don't want to get into it except that,
we saw it in 2000.
Steve Schmidt has already chided, Democrats for don't go too far left. So
right, the extremes on both sides are really the problem there, Blue Gal. And right. At this point, that's why the True Conservative magazine is going to be such a huge success.
Yeah,
because there's no difference between true conservatism and both siderism. Taking a position between the actual right and the imaginary left and saying in the middle somewhere is where everybody should be, and talking to your circle jerk of friends, all of whom have jobs in the media.
I want to do a shout out to our Senator Dick Durbin.
Yes,
who tweeted today. Remember Brian Benzakowski? He represented Russia's Alpha Bank and was a top staffer to Senator Sessions back when
his career must be over then, Blue Gal.
No.
No?
Senator Sessions, back when Jeff Sessions was a senator from Alabama. Senate Republicans plan to vote next week to confirm him to head the Department of Justice Criminal Division. He has Russian ties. He has Jeff Sessions ties. Dick Durbin continues, heading the DOJ Criminal Division is a critically important job. This person will supervise 600 federal prosecutors handling thousands of cases and investigations and will oversee sensitive matters such as the criminal investigation of Michael Cohen.
Oh, no.
Ben Zakowski has no prosecutorial experience. He showed poor judgment by choosing to represent Alpha Bank when he was seeking a DOJ job, despite reports that Alpha was also under criminal investigation. And he won't commit to recusing himself from Russia-related matters if confirmed. Why does President Trump want Brian Benzakowski for this important job? Says Dick Durbin.
Yeah.
Why not find an attorney who has actual prosecutorial experience and who is free and clear from Russia connections? Well, Dick Durbin, come on. Come on.
That's crazy talk, Dick.
We still don't know the full story behind Alpha Bank and what they did in 2016. I join my Senate Judiciary Democratic colleagues in calling for Ben Zakowski's nomination to be withdrawn.
Yeah.
Okay. Lots and lots of sunlight on that, please.
Yes.
Dick Durbin concludes, Republicans will try to confirm Ben Zakowski while attention is focused on the Supreme Court. This could be a pivotal moment in the Russia investigation. You know, and several people on Twitter are replying, I think your questions answer themselves, Dick Durbin.
Well, and we tried to get Dick Durbin to come to the Keeping Families Together rally on Saturday, but he was busy at the same rally in a different city.
Oh, so, in a bigger city?
In a bigger city.
Yeah.
Yes, even though he lives here. I mean, he actually has a house here. Apparently, we're too good for... No, that's not it. He's a senator from the whole state. I think he was in Champaign, maybe in Chicago, but he was definitely out with the people doing the people's business. And it was, and we had I don't want this week to go by. I mean, so much is happening so fast. Bill Shine, you do want to touch on the fact that Michael Cohen hired Lanny Davis as his lawyer today.
Tell everyone who Lanny Davis is, because some people might not know.
Lanny Davis is an old Bill and Hillary Clinton friend, fixer, family member, guy, et cetera, at Clinton-era White House guy, who knows a lot about everything and who certainly knows about impeachment. And now that Michael Cohen has separated himself from the joint defense with Donald Trump and is on his own, and it certainly looks like he's about to flip, Lonnie Davis tells me that you're about to go to war. You don't hire a Clinton loyalist to come to sue for peace, to come up with a nice middle ground, to come up with a settlement. You go knowing that you're about to go head to head with President Stupid over some shit that's going to end his career, possibly, and probably yours. And, whatever happens, you might very well spend the rest of your life in jail.
Yeah, but let's also realize that Lanny Davis is not a good person. I mean, this is a huge fuck you to Trump. I get that, because Lanny Davis, I mean, if you're going to have a dirty, grubby lobbyist Washington D.C. insider attorney who's willing to do Michael Cohen level of bad things for Hillary Clinton and the Clintons, but not stupid. No, but not stupid.
He wears
right?
gloves.
No, I get it, but he is, he is the brash attorney fixer guy, right?
Yeah.
And apparently he also represents a Ukrainian oligarch connected to Manafort. So there may be a conflict there. They're still trying to figure that out. It's just,
oh, honey, conflicts are so 2008, really.
But it is definitely a huge fuck you to Trump we're and what were we talking about with Roseanne's ex-husband that he's doing a show?
Oh, yes. Tom Arnold.
You had a good name for his show.
The Tom Arnold Irresponsible Speculation Hour.
It would be irresponsible not to speculate.
Yeah. Is it possible that Donald Trump? I don't care. I mean, he's on Vice. Yeah. He's on some, third-tier network.
Well, and Tom Arnold has been saying since before the election. That, oh, yeah, there's a P tape. Oh, yeah, there's an N-word tape. Oh, yeah, I know where all this stuff is. So we'll see how, teasing this show is, or whether there actually is something released that is newsworthy. Anyway. Okay, where do you want to go next,
Driftglass? One thing we're absolutely sure of is the entire. We know what the strategy is on our side, on the left. I mean, there's like 19 different strategies. There's winning elections. There's policy stuff. There's girding up for putting people in the streets every weekend if we have to. There's fundraising for the professional left, which is always very important. There's a whole bunch of things. Right now, the on the right side of the aisle, on the Republican lands. The Republican-held territories in our country. Clearly, what's going on is they are preparing the base, preparing their voters and supporters, Republican voters, to aggressively not pay attention to anything that happens over the next 6 months. Right. They're teaching them that you can't trust anything anyone says except Sean Hannity. And that's why you put Sean Hannity's employer in the White House behind a podium controlling the message. There is no longer any difference between Fox News, if there ever really was, and hate radio and the Republican Party and conservatism. It's all one thing. It's all, it's all National Socialism. There's a branch that does propaganda. There's a branch that builds roads. There's a branch that runs trains out to those camps that we don't want to talk about. But it's all one thing. And the people who run it are misfits and perverts and monsters and thugs. And the Republican Party has drawn all of them into one party. That's not to say every single terrible person who ever lived in this country is under one roof now, but damn well close. So we've squared off now. We know whose side they're on and whose side we're on, and their only way out of this, because they've painted themselves into a corner that they cannot get out of, in the short term, is to train their people, train the reprogrammable meatbags to pay no attention to anything anyone does. The only person you can trust is Donald Trump. And number two, preparing for that glorious day when this changes, when political power shifts even incrementally to the left, at which point the aggressive program of I'm an independent, I never supported Donald Trump, I have no idea what you're talking about, you're going to watch that roll out. I swear to God, they're going to pull out the old Bush off machine, the old Tea Party trick. They're going to repaint the whole wagon. They're going to declare that they're independents, they're constitutional something or others, and they had nothing to do with this. And the real question is, between now and then, how do we get Chuck Todd fired? How do we get the people who will absolutely, in advance that the people who will absolutely enable Republican criminals to escape the righteous judgment of history, just like they did the last time and just like they did the time before, the people who enabled Newt Gingrich, who let Newt Gingrich have a career long after he should have been pushing up daisies somewhere, or at least upselling hot apple pies on a highway off-ramp. How do we stop those people? Because those people are vulnerable. Those people actually have to listen to the public every now and then. You can shut people out if you're in politics. If you're Scott Pruitt, you can just have people kicked out. If you're Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you can get a phalanx of Praetorian guards to stand between the mob and your cheesecake every time you go out. That's what you can do. But people in the media, if you yell loud enough, you do get their fucking attention. And yep. I've seen it happen. I've seen Chuck Todd say, I know this is going to sound like both siderisms, but it's not, which means he got the message.
Which means he's definitely got the message.
And this is the week that Hugh Hewitt isn't here anymore.
Honestly. And I liked how you tweeted the best of Hugh Hewitt.
I did. It's a 30-second test pattern. And by the way, that high-pitched whine is his actual voice. He's got that soothing Laura Ingraham voice. But he'll float around for a while like a turd in a broken toilet, and eventually he'll float over onto Fox News, or he'll float over onto whatever the hell that network that SE Cup is on, or he'll take a job at RT. But once you've got your card stamped, you have a job for life. I mean, today's the day we learned that Ed Schultz passed away. And Ed Schultz went from being, a working class liberal champion to being a Russian stooge because that's where the money was. And he just followed a paycheck from a position that you could defend in principle and where he did a lot of good to a position where he absolutely sold out everything he believed in. And because he was in, his card was punched. He was employable. You could put him on the air anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, and he could do what you want him to do. So once you're in that group, there's no you leave toes up or not at all. So Hugh Hewitt will show up somewhere. The question then becomes, in this little window that we're going to have in the next year or so, how do we as liberals stop scattering our light in all directions and highly focus on reforming, changing, breaking into the New York Times and making sure the op-ed page editor, Mr. Bennett, stops putting idiots on the op-ed page? I don't know how to do that because I'm just a guy in a cornfield with a podcast and a beautiful wife.
Well, and there's a lot of us trying to do that. I think there's a lot of people, and the message is out there. So I'm not so much worried about our voices not being spoken. I'm worried about money muffling them because, as we know, when money becomes speech, money becomes the only speech.
Yep.
And I've said that many times. So all of our activism, here 700 rallies around the country with hundreds of thousands of people protesting. We have to carry that energy to the ballot box. I think that's where people are starting to realize, in the muffled world of the money pit that they're in, that, this is coming for us.
Yeah, it's tricky now because we have a whole summer to wait for the election.
We do, and it's hard to wait.
It's hard to wait. It's hard to sit through this. It's hard to watch this. It's hard to know that there's very little to be done between now and then. And
except work for the candidates donate to the candidates who are running against Republicans,
and let people know that they're not alone. Let people know out there, stranded in some red state hellscape, that they're not alone. There are people out there like them. It's easy to find comfort in a big city. Yeah, when I lived in Chicago, I could walk out my front door and be at the hippie joint in 30 seconds. I never had to leave the comfort of my very safe congressional district, my very safe ward, places where I was, I looked like a narc. I was the conservative. It was, I never had to leave there. So there was a great deal of comfort in the enormous number of people who were not like-minded, but in any specific way, but were like-minded in that we all agreed to live together in a more or less harmonious way, even though we're very, very different, which is the liberal ideal. It is really hard when you were living in Trump country to breathe sometimes, to just, to know that you're not living in a different country, you're just living in a different place. And there's people out here who care about you, who want very deeply to save you and save everything that we all love. And that there's, that we're going to try to save everybody. My beautiful wife said, look, that Nazi who's running for office, I want him to have health care.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want his children to have to be pauperized if he breaks his leg. I'd like them to be able to go to school and not go into debt. I'd like them to have clean air and clean water. We don't want what's best for America just for us. We want it for everyone because that's the smart way to be, and that's the only way to be. It's the only way to live together. And it is incredibly frustrating to live in a country where there are people who are just under a thick shell of stupid and anger and paranoia and rage and racism, and you can't reach them. There's just no way to do it. And believe me, I've spent 13 years trying, and there's just no way to reach these people. So we have to go around them. We have to go over them. We have to go through them. We have to make sure that their vision of America is irrelevant, is on the ash heap of history, because they're old and angry and bitter, and they're not long for this world. And I'm not going to let them drag us into the grave with them. That's my goal. Here's a classic example of what I'm talking about with Hugh Hewitt. If you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
Hugh Hewitt tweeted today, after the resignation of Scott Pruitt. Scott Pruitt is a good friend and a very good man, caricatured by the left and the MSM. I hope he sets to work on a memoir ASAP and deals out 1/10 of what he took. He's a man of great faith and perseverance, so he probably won't, but the attacks on his family were unconscionable. That's Hugh Hewitt.
Yeah.
Hugh Hewitt can never be reached. People who believe Hugh Hewitt is a smart guy who tells them the truth cannot be reached anymore. They have separated themselves from us. And unlike, I've said this before, unlike the residents of North Korea, the people who believe that Sean Hannity is telling them the truth do this to themselves. All they have to do is change the channel. All that's required of them is to turn it off. Stop listening to people that you know have been lying to you. And they won't do it. And you can't stop someone from doing that. You can rescue someone from captivity, but these people want to be captives. They like being slaves. They like being reprogrammable meat bags. It's comforting to them. They like following tyrants. They like being the subject of a dictator. And the worst thing in the world, the thing that's, a holy water enemy to these people, is a tolerant, pluralistic, liberal country. That
benefits them personally.
That benefits them. They can't stand that. The thought of being, living on Devon Avenue in Chicago is their worst fucking nightmare. And that's why we can't live together anymore. That's why we can't be one country, be united behind anything anymore. Because their vision of America is diametrically opposed. And it's not policy anymore.
No.
Their vision of America is to make my wife cry.
Yep.
That's
politics.
That's all they want to do.
That's politics for them. That is politics for them, is they get that. And I've shed a lot of tears over Trump policies over the course of the past 500 plus days, and held out that hanky to you and said, this is what they want. They want my Kleenex full of tears, and then they win. Driftglass, it was very clarifying to me this week to listen to the segment of the Maria Bartiromo interview with Donald Trump. Oh
God, yeah, and listening to the what's his name? I'll get it as soon as you're done talking. But
there was a panel There were many panel discussions about this.
Brian Stelter,
yeah. But Donald Trump got handed a softball, many softballs by Maria Bartiromo. Her performance was panned pretty much universally on the sane side of public thought. But she pitched this softball: how will you bring our country together? Mm-hmm. And Donald Trump said, our base is great. The other side needs to take it easy.
Yeah.
And that to me was very clarifying, because while I don't think Donald Trump is a legitimate president of the United States, and I hate every policy that he has put into effect, I don't think that they are actual policies. I think it's just he just wants to erase Barack Obama from history. And I don't think he's a good person. But no. I never wanted to say not my president, because I do believe in democracy and I do want us to have a functioning government, even with a Republican president. I do want that because that's better for us. Mm-hmm. And when he said that, I was like, oh, okay, so you're not my president.
Right. You've declared yourself.
You have told me that you're not my president. So.
It came to me the other day that he is the second president of the Confederacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
He really is the second Confederate president. Yep. Jefferson Davis died in ignominy. The South fell and was burned, and you know the history. But Donald Trump is the second president of the Confederacy, and proudly so. And here's the difference. 150 years ago, the Alexander Stephens, who was an awful person, who was the vice president of the Confederacy, could at least articulate very specifically why he believed his incredibly racist white supremacist view was a noble Christian thing.
And he had a policy to put into effect, which was, we're going to maintain slavery because we believe we're waking up in the morning believing that's the God-ordained thing to do. Right. And he said so. You know, it was his policy.
It was his cornerstone
evil.
Speech.
And it's evil.
But he could at least and Jefferson Davis and the leaders of the Confederacy could at least articulate why they thought their absolute core racism, why segregation, why white supremacy, why murdering black people was a holy Christian thing to do.
And they knew what they were fighting for. Day to day, it was consistently bad. Consistently evil. Yep.
But if they could talk about it. 150 years later, the second president of the Confederacy has no idea about any of this. He just knows that racism that was bequeathed to him by the Confederacy is the most effective bludgeon he has to get power.
Right.
And the meatheads who follow him will stand up and cheer every time he punches a Mexican.
Right.
Or calls out black people, or calls a woman ugly who he disagrees with. They have devolved. I mean, not that they were great to begin with, but at least they could say 150 years ago why they thought what they did. Now it's just oink, oink. I believe what the dear leader tells me, oink, oink.
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Trump knows exactly what buttons to push.
He knows his audience and how to make them cheer. Yes, he does. That is one skill he has. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what happened. That's what happens when you don't let Reconstruction work.
That's what happens when you lose interest and don't want another war and don't want to fight anymore. And so we'll just let the South do what they want to do for
and I'm sure there was a
century.
I'm sure there was a lot of talk about courtesy during the 8 years of Reconstruction.
Civility and courtesy, and let's all get along.
And courtesy. Yes, right. Can we acknowledge that the war is behind us now and move on with our lives? There's important things we have to do. And that's all these people want. All the Republicans want is for us to move on. Because what you're seeing play out in front of you, I mean, the wrong person is doing it. They certainly never planned to have an actual crazy-haired, right-wing, orange lunatic as president, but they certainly plan to have all the policies he's enacting put in place.
Right.
So this is the poison fruit of 40, 50 years of long planning, of money spent, of time spent, of think tanks put together, of newspapers put together, an entire religion invented out of nothing, their own television network. We're watching what took them decades to build come to fruition. And this is their vision of America. And this is their last gasp because our kids are not going to put up with any of this shit.
That's right.
And so they have to lock it in place. They have to put as many judges in place that will do another holding action after they lose the Second Civil War again. They have to have enough fifth columnists in place, enough David Brookses, enough Michael Gersons, enough Max Boots, enough Wall Street Journals, enough New York Times op-ed pages, enough Joe Scarboroughs in place so that when it all starts to slide to the left, those people act as a brake. Say, wait a minute. No, we don't want any crazy socialism. The most left people I hear in the Democratic Party, even the Democratic Socialists, sound like Franklin Roosevelt, frankly.
Exactly.
So it's not like their arguments are ridiculous. They've won. They won. They got giant tax cuts. They fucked the country up. They're rolling back the environment. They're doing everything they've ever wanted to do, and now they have to lock in place a way of what's the stick you put across your steering wheel?
Yeah, it is. It's a steering wheel lock. Yeah, you have to do that.
Just to make sure
the car right and leave it there. Yeah.
Yes, turn to the right, all the way to the right, and lock it in place so that even if there's no driver, even if there's no one there, you can't move the car any way but right. And that's what they're trying to do now. And our job is to make sure that we remember that no, the center now is already so far to the right of where Reagan ever dreamed of being that Reagan would sound like a socialist if he were alive today. And Reagan was a monster. So our job is to, as always, is to remember, is to be the tenders of memory, to be the people whose job it is to let people. Don't let them forget that once there was a spot, that there was Camel, that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, a social safety net, voting rights, human rights, environmental protection, labor protection. All of these things are our natural rights. They're taking things away from us that we never thought we'd lose. We're going to lose Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
I really do believe in a year or two, Roe versus Wade will be illegal in 18 to 20 states.
Will be overturned in abortion will be illegal in 18 to 20 states.
And won't that come as a fucking shock to people who thought it was a natural right that could never be touched?
Yep.
No. All this, you can lose all this tomorrow. And the reason you can lose it tomorrow because the Republican Party has been spent 40 years putting themselves into a position to take it all away from you. So now you have to fight. And
they've been using that to win elections from women.
Yeah.
From good-hearted women who love babies, blah, 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 and not meaning it because they send their mistresses to get abortions. And now, that check is being cashed because their donors don't want to put up with that anymore. And then you find out that 1 in 4 women, including the women in evangelical fundamentalist churches, have had abortions. And that's when and I think that's what's got to happen now on that issue is everybody has to come out. Mm-hmm. Not that we want to violate anyone's privacy, because that's the whole point of Roe v. Wade.
Right.
But your birth control story needs to be part of this conversation, and what that means, and what that means to your economy, and how and it is not just abortion, folks.
No,
I mean, I could go on for another half hour, and I don't mean to do that, but this is about forced birth. This is not about abortion. This is about forcing women to carry pregnancies to terms, whether they want to or not. And that's what this is about.
And that's in the real world. Over in the fantasy world, I'm reading Jackie Schechter reporting out of Montana, where Donald Trump has announced that we have great health care coming out, and it just came out 2 weeks ago.
Wait, what?
I didn't hear about this great health care. I remember all the promises that this idiot made and that the people on the right were stupid enough to believe. Great health care, never going to cut Medicare, never Medicaid, never Social Security. We're going to have great health care. It's going to be pennies, low deductible, great doctors. Everything's going to be fucking gold. You're going to have the best fucking health care in history. NASA.
As someone on Twitter today said, we are all Trump University students now.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's do a news roundup real quick.
Now the news. Now, Donald Trump asked a bunch of foreign policy advisors over and over again last August about, so how about invading Venezuela? Would that be great? Could we do that? Can we do that? We got an army, right? What about they got all this oil? Let's go get them. Because remember, Donald Trump's plan for the Middle East was to surround the oil, take the oil. And again,
that was Dick Cheney's plan, too. Yeah, and then he found out there were a whole lot of people in the State Department who were going to quit en masse if he did that.
It got more complicated. But we got rid of those people. And now it's just a bunch of thugs who want to steal whatever's not nailed down and fuck and burn everything that they leave behind. So, so why not invade Venezuela? I mean, I can do it, right? I can declare a national emergency, just invade and there's nobody left in the White House to tell him no. Well, the Trump administration is going to roll back Obama guidelines about college admission.
Yeah, and that's not going to go over real well. No. One of the things I noticed using the ladies' room at Augustana College, where Junior Dude goes to school, is all that Title IX stuff is all over the bathroom walls, what students' rights are, and the department we have, and how we will deal with you and your complaint or your charges or whatever it is that's going on with you. If you feel you have been sexually assaulted or mistreated in any way, we'll keep it confidential. You don't have to use campus police. You can use a counselor, or you run the entire. I mean, this is the law now, except Betsy DeVos wants to undo all this, but you run the investigation basically as the victim. That you get to decide whether you just want counseling, do you want law enforcement involved, do you want campus law enforcement involved, do you want the dean involved, and it's all. The reason I know all this is I read it while I was in the toilet.
That's why it's there.
At Augustana, right. So that while you're in a private moment and you might need to deal with this, you actually have some information of who you can call to get help. And nobody's taking down those signs at these campuses. We are all in a holding pattern at nearly every school saying, we're waiting for this to be over, to blow over and not have this administration in power anymore. And we're going to just keep protecting students from being victimized while we're waiting. That's the point. And they're not breaking the law by doing that, by maintaining standards within the campus that this is what we do at our campus. They're not breaking any laws. Okay.
Well, frankly, I can't speak for anyone else, but I wouldn't even consider letting any child or stepchild of mine go to a school that practices segregation, discrimination, or otherwise treats.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a marketing thing these days, especially. You don't discriminate against students for race. Duh. Wilbur Ross, it turns out he shorted two more stocks. 5 in total during his time as Commerce Secretary. I forgot about those other 2 stocks. And I do want to thank Arla Sabani and one other correspondent who wrote us and said and explained to me about shorting stocks that it depends on how it's done, but it can be an insurance policy against loss. And when done in an above board manner is not illegal. It's not, but Wilbur Ross is just corrupt.
No, and he's the seventh most corrupt person.
Seriously.
In the cabinet, in any cabinet meeting at any given time. That's how bad they are.
Yep.
Just FYI, there's more. I put a trigger warning on
noticed. I saw that. Yeah.
ICE agents are forcing parents to choose between being deported by themselves or being deported with their children. They're holding kids as hostages.
Yep.
And telling parents you can either be deported solo or we'll give you your kid back and you'll sign a paper agreeing to be deported. But we're kicking you out regardless.
And you will not be allowed to claim asylum if you want to keep your kid. Yeah.
Right. They're using people's children as hostages, as leverage.
They're also claiming that a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, et cetera, can appear in court by themselves.
Yeah. So, I am hard pressed, and I'm a man with a very vivid imagination. I'm hard pressed to think of anything more loathsome than setting up a policy to use people's children against them.
Well,
I know that if you go to jail, if you were a murderer, if you're an armed robber on your second or third bit, and you're going to go to jail, and your jail time is going to involve you not having your kids with you, but your kids will still be with their mom, probably in the same city you are, but at least within chartering distance. And that's part of the process of being convicted of a felony. These people are being convicted of nothing. They're here legally. They're here seeking asylum, which is what we've been telling people for 200 years they should do. Our law says it's okay. International law says it's okay. The worst case scenario is that they're committing a misdemeanor. They're jaywalking. They're speeding. Nobody has their kids taken away for a speeding ticket or jaywalking. But we're stealing their children and holding them hostage. And anyone involved in that is a war criminal and should be treated as a fucking war criminal.
Yes, I agree with that. Someone asked the Marquis de Sade what the worst torture in the world was. And, he had a very vivid imagination and liked to talk about pain. And he said, making a person watch their child get tortured is the worst torture in the world.
Yeah. And Donald Trump does it Donald Trump does it while smiling.
Yep.
And his base applauds him for it. That's
because they have dehumanized brown people. And it is a process that is as old as Nazi Germany and before that. And and that is not my country. I will not celebrate a country that does that. And
it's how you lynched people in the South and made it a party.
Yep, exactly.
Because you weren't lynching a person, you were lynching a piece of property that got out of hand.
Right.
And you were teaching lessons to the rest of your property that it dare not do what you tell it not to do.
Precisely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. No, that's right. All right. So, and patriotism is at an all-time low because of what our government is doing. Not because we don't love America. Brit Hume, you fuck. All right. 49% of voters say Trump is racist and 47% say he is not racist. But the generic ballot is showing women at plus 25 Democrat.
Yeah. Well, here's my problem with that. Why aren't we hearing from the 3% in the middle, Blue Gal, who say that Trump is both a racist and a not racist? I think in the center, where 4 people live, and 2 of those people have columns in the New York Times, those are the people we should be hearing from.
Those 4 out of 100 all have columns in the New York Times editorial page. All right. The Senate Intelligence Committee backed the intelligence community's assessment, all 13 agencies, that Putin was trying to help Trump. Yes.
And then they went to Moscow to celebrate the 4th of July.
Did, yes, to celebrate the 4th of July.
And Donald Trump, speaking of Moscow news, hot news out of Moscow, Donald Trump will be reporting to his handler in the Kremlin immediately after he fucks up the NATO meeting. So no notes will be made. There'll be no outside witnesses. And we only found out about it in this country the same way we always find out about Kremlin and Putin and Trump stuff, through Russian media.
Where they bragged about it.
Yeah, of course they are. Because he's their little bitch.
Susan Collins, Susan Collins is a tree stump. Explain yourself, Driftglass.
Susan Collins is, I'm going to steal from John Oliver. The least satisfying game show. Susan Collins is going to disappoint you again. Yay! Susan Collins is a Republican.
She's not going to say Roe v. Wade with her principles. Yeah.
She's going to sit there in her quavery Aunt Alice voice, explain that I talked to them and they're not going to get rid of Roe. Her entire predicate is I can trust Donald Trump.
Yes, right. Really, that's it. That's it. I can trust Donald Trump.
She is the abused spouse. She really is. I mean, she and Murkowski are sitting there in the middle of the worst disaster for women that we have deliberately unleashed in this country for a very long time.
And if both of them switched parties,
everything would change overnight. But they're not going to because, taxes, I suppose, or something else.
I don't know.
Because because Nazis would egg their house. And they'd never hold office again.
Hey, Driftglass, I have a question for you. Guess who's increasing their production of enriched uranium for nuclear weapons?
Oh, I know this one. It rhymes with Kim Jong something or other. North Korea apparently snookered that deal-making son of a gun Donald Trump and has gone right ahead and told him to go fuck himself, and we're going to make more uranium, and we don't care what you think. And Donald Trump, epic deal maker, is heroically looking the other way and pretending it's not happening.
Look over here at Barack Obama giving citizenship to 2,500 Iranians.
Tariffs are going to make us great again. Donald Trump has drafted a bill. Well, he didn't do it because he doesn't really write. But he told his people to write a bill that basically would jettison our commitment to the World Trade Organization, which is very exciting. So we'll be leaving that organization pretty soon. I do wonder if anyone's going to let us back in, or they're going to put us on probation for 10 or 20 years. So if you're fucked up enough to first vote for George W. Bush twice and then elect Donald fucking Trump after you had Barack Obama in the middle, maybe you should take a time out.
Yeah, maybe you're the problem. Yeah. And, Trump's not happy with the revised NAFTA deal with Canada and Mexico. He won't sign it until after the midterm elections. Meanwhile, Canada imposed new tariffs on $12.5 billion worth of American exports and goods. It's like we sell stuff, and he just realized that. Also, a podcast host connected to Howard Stern, which you would think they would already have Donald Trump's phone number. But they tricked not only Trump, but apparently it was Jared who forwarded the call to Air Force One. Trump called him from Air Force One by telling the White House switchboard operator that he had Senator Bob Menendez on the line for him. And and he has legal representation now because apparently the Secret Service are mad at him. A whole bunch of people are suggesting charges against him.
Good luck with that.
So he has Michael Avenatti as his attorney.
Yeah, and if you need your bills paid, I'm sure Howard Stern will cut you a check. So
yeah.
My favorite story this week, for not really, but weirdly, is that it turns out Anthony Kennedy's son, Borkley, his name's not really Borkley. His name is actually Justin, but Anthony Kennedy's son worked at Deutsche Bank for more than a decade, helping to loan, guess who? Donald Trump more than $1 billion at a time when nobody else would touch him. It just gets creepier and weirder.
You know how deep the corruption goes in the Trump administration, Driftglass?
How deep?
All the way down.
All the way down. It's corruption all the way down.
It's corruption all the way down.
But don't worry, because Larry Kudlow looked straight into the camera on Fox Business and said that deficits were coming down rapidly.
Yeah.
He lied.
We talked about that last week, but yes, he did. Yes, he lied.
And I'm sure a bunch of people emailed their smarty pants liberal relatives and friends exclaiming that Donald Trump is bringing down the deficit rapidly because noted Coke hound Larry Kudlow said so.
Mm-hmm.
And when we pointed out that this is a lie, not actually true, they changed the subject to football.
So Trump wants to make a deal with Putin on Syria that would allow the United States to get out ASAP.
Yeah. Yep.
That's called surrender.
Yeah. And
Donald.
So we're potentially going to give up Syria and the Crimea in one fell swoop because Donald Trump wants to keep his handler and patron in the Kremlin happy.
Well, and I really came to the conclusion the other day that Donald Trump wants to divide the world into three parts. Mm-hmm. He wants China to give him money, and he wants Russia to give him money. Uh-huh. And he will keep North America and our hemisphere and abuse everyone to the south of the border and invade them and take their oil or whatever he has to do. But Europe can go to Putin and Asia can go to China, and he doesn't give a shit. He just doesn't give a shit.
I called this last week the Greater Caucasian Co-Prosperity Sphere.
Yeah,
which is a play on what the Japanese had planned after World War II should they win. It's a bunch of white supremacist, racist, Nazi, neo-Nazi leaders and mobs all finding themselves and discovering that they have actual muscle now that they put a fellow traveler in the White House, and he's surrounded himself with people who will do anything he says.
Exactly.
Finally, we touched on Jim Jordan. Hope he goes to jail for a long time. I just hope he doesn't get reelected. I have no faith at all in Republican voters. They will look. They looked an actual child sexual predator in the eye and nominated him for the Senate.
Yeah,
in Alabama.
Yeah,
they have nominated 4 fucking Nazis, actual out and proud neo-Nazis, to run for national office in this country under the Republican Party. That's the Republican base, and don't let anybody pretend that it's not. I don't care how genteel they are. I don't care if they go to the country club. I don't care if they're nice and smell nice, and you can hold hands at the square dance. When they get into the voting booth, they vote Nazi Party. And those people will smile and smile as they take your children away.
Exactly. Hey, Driftglass, we've got a couple letters to read, if you don't mind. One is from a listener and longtime friend, known in the internet as Le Petit Fromage, who wrote us from New York City and said, I just wanted to share my lived experience as a resident of District NY14, where Ms. Ocasio-Cortez won her primary. The district actually covers parts of 2 boroughs, the Northeast Bronx as far west as the New York Botanical Gardens and part of the Bronx Zoo, as well as along the northern edge of Queens, bordering the water and stretching west to the East River. So far as I could tell, neither candidate did very much campaigning in my neck of the woods in Pelham Bay. In fact, if I hadn't received a letter from my former city councilman endorsing Crowley, as well as a single mail piece from Crowley the day before the election, I wouldn't have even realized I needed to vote in this primary.
Wow.
If nothing else, the Board of Elections will usually send something out reminding you to vote and of your polling place, etc., but they didn't this time. Ocasio-Cortez did run a few print ads in my local weekly, but the paper also covers neighborhoods that fall into a few different districts. There have been a couple of other primaries in those areas this past spring due to some shuffling around at the state level, and a few interim seats had to be filled as a result. So I kept thinking she was running in one of those other districts. And even though I got a couple mail pieces from Ocasio-Cortez, in my humble opinion, the information about what district was she running in was not as clearly or prominently displayed as it might have been. So every time I saw them, I kept wondering who she was. Anyway, I adjusted my plans to go vote the next day before work. When my boyfriend and I got to our polling place, even for an off year, the place was literally empty, at least at the time we went, about 8 a.m. In fact, we were the only 2 people there at that particular moment, no lines or anything. As we stood there waiting for someone to check us in, one of the poll workers asked us, "Are you here to vote?" What I wanted to say was, well, of course I'm here to vote. Why else would I drag myself over to the edge of nowhere at practically the crack of dawn? After redistricting a few years ago, our polling place changed, and it's now a bit out of the way. Instead, I simply nodded my head and they proceeded to check us in, give us our ballots, and off we scurried to the privacy booths to make our selection. And they scanned them in. Democracy in 5 minutes. I have to tell you, honestly, I would have been happy with either of them. But I suppose it's good to have younger and newer life and perspectives coming into the mix. It will be interesting to see how my area responds to a young, progressive Latina. I'm not sure about the demographic makeup of the Queens part of the district, but in the area of the Bronx where I am, the civic and political life is dominated by working-class conservative second- and third-generation Italians. They moved here in the 1950s as the Bronx began to be developed. Relative to other parts of the city, it is very suburban in look and feel, and that's just how they want to preserve it. Among other things, the main local issues of concern revolve around overdevelopment and the need for more parking. In fact, several years ago, a regularly issued rallying cry in the weekly column of a former civic leader, may she rest in peace, was "Drill, baby, drill." She wanted the cost of oil and gas to be affordable so people could put gas in their cars and drive the 2 blocks from their homes to the local shopping districts. Anyway, that's the electoral news from this corner of the world. Thank you for writing that. That is all very interesting information.
It is.
And I'm glad you voted. You were one of 10% of people that voted in that district in that primary. So that is awesome. And I have another one. This made me very proud. Peggy writes us this week and said, I opened a letter to my son from my congressman today, and I thought it was just a campaign mailer. But it thanked him for his call about separating migrant families. I was shocked. I thought my son was entirely apolitical. I have even had to nag him to vote in the past. But I remembered that he works in a restaurant with many immigrants. This is probably personal for him. I will need to nag him some more. Because he has moved to Missouri and he has to vote for Claire McCaskill. Okay, good for you. I know that's not an easy vote to make, but that's the choice you got, and you got to do it. My daughter lives in Boston, but she still has a 913 area code on her cell phone. So she still calls the representatives in Kansas, including idiot Yoder, who is proud to have gotten the Right to Life endorsement. By the way, he has 7 challengers in the Democratic Party primary vying to unseat him, and it's usually a struggle to get one. I am very proud of my kids. You should be. You should be. Children are the future.
Way to go, Mom.
And how awesome that is, Mom. You raised them right. And it must have been such a nice surprise to know that your son called his congressman about separating immigrant families, because it's personal. It is. It should be personal to all of us. Absolutely. Each week, we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is Evita, a longtime friend of our podcast, Lee. He is an expat living in Mexico, and this is his eldest cat. She is the alpha cat of the household. She runs everything, and she's the only one who demands people food from her owners because, damn it, she's a person.
It's obvious. She's a person.
Evita is a person, and she will have her people food. Go visit Evita at our Facebook page and website. She is a lovely kitty. You can send your Internet Kitty to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, or you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions! Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job. And we are getting really close, Driftglass, to making up entirely for your part-time salary where you got laid off. And on our Patreon account, we're setting that money aside and saying, this is Driftglass's salary for being on the podcast. It is, we are about $150 away from totally matching that salary and saying, yeah, we don't need that job anymore. So thank you for doing that. We appreciate it.
All that money is going to build my trailer, by the way. My personal trailer for green M&Ms, only green M&Ms.
Yeah. We'll the talent. You know, you're the talent. That's right.
By the way, just as a matter of history, since I was feeling guilty about not posting anything on the 4th of July, even though, because
we were behind the wheel of a car. We drove to St. Louis to get middle child. She came home yesterday.
But we're old school bloggers, and we podcast and blog through weddings and funerals.
On our wedding day, we podcasted.
We did literally podcast on our wedding day. I went back to the July 2nd, 2010. Thingy, which was not even the Professional Left. It was just the Driftglass and Blue Gal podcast. It was just called the Friday Podcast.
That was like, the podcast was like 5 months old or 6 months old at that point.
This was 8 years ago. 8 years, not 8 weeks, not 8 days.
Chris 8 years, wow.
8 years. And we
weren't even a thing.
No, we were flirty.
We were flirty. Well, yeah.
I saw my future in your eyes, beautiful.
Thank you, darling. But we weren't engaged or married or anything at that point at all. No, we were just, you were living in Chicago and we were podcasting every week just by Skype. I mean, it was just talking on the phone. Yeah.
And the three topics that jumped out at me immediately were the economy and the GOP trying to pretend it gives a shit about the working class, the racism of the fake Tea Party,
wow,
and me getting laid off. So, you
got laid off that week. Yes,
I did. So
this is what happens when you work for nonprofits, by the way.
I know. I mean, this is what happens.
I want to say this. This is not Driftglass's fault that he's laid off a lot.
No,
really.
No.
It's always done with, we're taking a different direction. We have to reprioritize our funding. You've lost our grant. We've done this. We've done that. And it's like, okay, I know I got to go. And it's because he donates his talent at a discount to nonprofits that he believes in every time.
I do.
And that's how he works. So,
and eventually they run out of money, or they run up to the point where they have to move on to something else.
Right.
And it's got, as I've told the people who laid me off recently, I've been fired from much better places than this.
With a smile and a wry smile and a laugh as well.
But here's the thing: blogging is. I've done blogging longer than I've done anything.
Yeah, right.
It's no big secret. I worked for the city of Chicago for 10 years.
Yeah. Yep.
I eclipsed that 3 years ago.
Blogging.
So,
right.
It's this is what I do, and I write, and I do a lot of other things, and occasionally. One of my resumes gets a ping and someone will hire me and it looks great. And then it's like, we're really sorry. We have no more money or whatever. We can't afford to pay you, or we can afford to pay you in cheese sandwiches and subscriber copies.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And I'd love for it to be something else, but it's not something else. But just as a matter of just cracking me up. This was during the glory days. This was during the Obama days. This was, on the cusp of the Tea Party. This is when, we actually had control of one branch of government, at least. And it was the racism of the right, the fact that they're hijacking the economic issue and pretending they give a shit about workers, and me losing my job. I just thought that was goddamn funny. So I posted it up on the 4th of July.
Some things are eternal.
Yes,
these things. Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast and the two of us with a contribution, and you can too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. Our PayPal, postal address, Patreon, GoFundMe, all that information is there at proleftpod.com, along with merch, because you might want to have a Both Sides Don't bumper sticker on your car, or a T-shirt to wear to a rally or something like that. You
know what I wore to the rally, Blue Gal?
Did you wear Both Sides Don't? Oh, good for you. And you helped some nuns.
I did. I was
some
in charge.
Kick-ass nuns, I should say.
Some kick-ass nuns. I was in charge of procuring duct tape, which
at the Betsy Dirksen Londrigan headquarters. She's running for Congress, and she's going to unseat Rodney Davis. And her office had duct tape, and you know where to find her. Yeah.
I know how to ask for duct tape. I'm pretty good at that. I walked in all sweaty and weird looking and said, please, for God's sakes, it's 120 degrees outside. And they gave me duct tape, and I went out and did my thing. I moved some chairs around and
hung signs for some nuns.
But they had to go up high, and they couldn't reach. So I said, excuse me, ma'am.
You're a nice young man. You are.
Oh, that nice young man. And then I gave the duct tape back, because that's what you do when you borrow something. And you know what? And the rally proceeded without a hitch. So
that's good. I could not go to the rally because my shingles, it was still acting up a lot. And I felt terrible about that. But I sent my husband to go do good work, and he did. And I'm still suffering. So keep a good thought for me. Get your shingle shot, and I'll recover. It's slow, but I'll get better.
And it was a good metaphor, because my job was just to help out.
Yeah, right.
Just do what you can. Here's what I can do. I can move some chairs around. I can get people into the shade. I can bring people some water, and I can do some just gaffer stuff, taping shit down.
Right, the tall guy stuff.
And that's, the movements need people doing all those things.
Look for an opportunity to help and use your skills, whatever they are, to help. I appreciate you, Driftglass. Thank you for taking such good care of me And thank all of you for taking care of us. We love you guys so much. In addition to that, you can please share our show on Facebook or Twitter. And thank you for doing that. Back on the script, Fran. All right. Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Oh, Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties can't wait for next year's third Civil War, which just might include congressional hearing potato salad and sweet impeachment tea.
Let's think about living. Let's think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the bopping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the whine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2018, DGBG Productions Incorporated.